The brothers saw Joseph from afar. Before he came close to them, they conspired to kill him. And they said to one another, Hine ba'al hachalomot. Here comes that dreamer. Now let us kill him, they thought. Throw him into these pits. Say that a beast devoured him. And then, v'nir'eh ma yiyu chalomotav. Then we shall see what comes of his dreams. A peculiar statement, a challenge, certainly based on the theology of Torah itself. Let's see if his dreams come true once he's dead and he can't make sure that they come true. In fact, in the Babylonian Talmud, Rabbi Yitzchak says that this verse calls out Durasheni, that you should interpret me because it doesn't make any sense. Obviously, if he's dead, his dreams of being a leader and ruling over everybody else can come true. So it must mean something else. And we know it means something else based on what follows. Reuven sees their plan and says, don't kill him, put him in this pit until I come back and we'll figure it out. And then he comes back too late because in the meantime, Judah comes up with his own plan to sell him as a servant, as a slave. And then Reuven takes his tunic, and they decide to smother it in blood of that very animal that they thought previously would have devoured him and bring it to their father Yaakov, who in turn mourns. Let us kill him and see what comes of his dreams. Rabbi Yitzchak, when saying that this verse needs to be interpreted, suggests, and Rashi interprets further, that what he's really saying and what the brothers are saying are, let's see if people will believe us. We're going to make a claim that we, the readers of Torah, know not to be true. And we're going to see if it's believable. It's an interesting thought. Jacob goes through his entire life until the end of his life when he's reunited with Yosef, when Yosef is finally second in command in Egypt, believing the claim to be true, believing what they said to be accurate, believing it as fact that Joseph was killed and Joseph was mourned, so much so that he feared even sending Benjamin to Egypt with the rest of his sons to ask for food during a period of famine. Let us see what comes of his dreams. Let us see if what we claim will be taken as truth and thus become truth. Over the past week and a half or so, we saw two verdicts that had in our country, in the judicial system in our country, that really swept up the nation. In some ways, very different circumstances, in some ways rooted in the pandemic of gun violence that haunts and plagues our nation, much more so than any coronavirus ever could. The first, when Kyle Rittenhouse was on trial for murder, found innocent the claim of self-defense. The second, 3 white men found guilty of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. Also, though, they were claiming self-defense. Now you see, we can look at what happened in Brunswick, Georgia, this case where these 3 white men were on video chasing down and shooting in the back an unarmed black man as a victory for destroying and dismantling the systemic racism of our criminal justice system, especially in the Deep South, especially when there was a jury of 11 white individuals and only one person of color. And we could say justice has been pursued. The reality being that the evidence was pretty clear, and yet we live in a reality where we still had to sit on the edge of our seats to see if those who clearly, on video, murdered an unarmed individual because they claimed he looked threatening, because they claimed he looked dirty and suspicious, we were sitting on the edge of our seats to see if they would in fact be found guilty, if their account of what happened, regardless of any video, would be believed. And then we had this other case, a case of Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who also claimed self-defense, on trial for murder himself, taking an AR-15-like assault rifle across state lines as a mourner, claiming self-defense in response to protests that erupted in Kenosha after Jacob Blake was shot by a police officer. And he traveled across state lines and in self-defense shot 3 individuals, killing 2 of them, and traveled back over state lines back to Illinois, only later to be arrested. And he claimed the same claim that these 3 individuals in Brunswick who murdered an unarmed black man claimed, that it was self-defense. It's fascinating. Also, video of him with his assault rifle, posing with armed militia groups. But he was found innocent. Now we could argue maybe the prosecutors botched the case. Maybe the evidence wasn't as clear-cut. Maybe jurors took pity on somebody who was a minor at the time. But both cases really force us to ask the same question that Jacob's sons were asking. What will be believed, and who will believe what we say? Because that's ultimately the challenge of our criminal justice system, and that's ultimately the challenge of justice altogether. Because, well, we like to believe in objectivity, justice is ultimately subjective because we each have our own beliefs, our own truths of what we believe to be right and just in society. And for 3 men in the Deep South for much of our country's history, saying that they were justifiably or unjustifiably, but claiming it was justifiably scared because there was a black man in their midst would have been enough in Brunswick, Georgia, to give them an innocent verdict. In fact, that the defense attorneys claimed that the black preachers and pastors who were in the courtroom were a threat to justice, referring to them as a lynch mob because they were there pursuing justice. So much so that the call for Jewish and Muslim clergy were asked to come to Brunswick and sit in the courtroom as well, just to observe, to claim the fight for justice. You know, it's easy to look at this statement by Jacob's sons after the fact, after we know that Joseph ends up in Potiphar's home, after we know that Joseph ends up in prison, after we know that Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, after we know that Joseph becomes second in command in Egypt, after we know that Joseph saves not just Egypt, but the entire region during a 7-year famine. But the essence of this initial statement is if we say something, even if it is untruthful, and they knew it to be untruthful, will others believe us? That is at the roots, ultimately, of any fight for justice. Do we believe an individual or not? And that is ultimately at the root of what we strive to be as Jews, fighting to build a more just society, but it begins with what and who we believe. In a flawed system where one case in Brunswick, Georgia should have been pretty cut and dry, and yet we were on the edge of our seats because of the historic nature of racism in the Deep South. Another case I would claim was equally cut and dry, but according to 12 jurors, not so much. Tomorrow night, we begin the festival of Hanukkah when we are commanded, unlike our Shabbat candles, to light the candles of our Chanukiot and not take advantage of the light for ourselves. There's a practical nature to lighting Shabbat candles before we had lanterns, electricity. It wasn't a romantic candlelit dinner. It was you lit your Shabbat candles, had dinner, and when the candles went out, it was pitch black, and that's how you knew it was time for bed. But Hanukkah candles, we don't light them to light up our dinner tables. We don't light them to use the fire to read from that light. We don't light them to illuminate the darkness of our homes. Rather, we light them to place them in our windows and fulfill the obligation of Persum Hanes, of Persum Anisa, of spreading and promoting the miracle of the festival. We go on a whole nother tangent trying to determine what exactly that miracle is, but that's a whole nother Devar Torah. But our obligation is to take our light and to spread it to the darkness of the world at the darkest point in the year. No different than what the prophet Isaiah says, to be an Or L'Goyim, to be a light unto this world. And so, the next time somebody challenges a system of justice and says, what will come of their dreams? The next time somebody lies and says, let's see if people will believe me. Question is, what will we do with our lights that we yearn to spread to this world? How will we light up the darkness, the history that is unquestionably way too dark? How will we create a more just society? When we put our Chanukiot in our windows, may the light of the menorah remind us to fight that fight and do exactly that. Shabbat Shalom.